Welcome to this month of April's first The Jam session, where we explore enterprise technology across various tech domains. I'm your new bi-weekly host, Cher the Datanista Fox. Robert Eve will return hosting the mid-month jams. Today, we're diving into a really critical conversation, data code detrusted. Data trust decoded. Wow, I'm tripping over my words. Moving beyond compliance. Regulatory frameworks like GDPR and CCPA set a solid foundation for protecting data, but true data trust extends far beyond simply following the rules. Organizations that excel in building trust embrace transparency, accountability, and ethical data practices, creating a culture where stakeholders feel confident that their data is being handled responsibly. But what does it take to really operationalize these principles? And how can organizations embed trust into their data ecosystems? So, to explore these questions, I'm thrilled to be joined by three distinguished panelists who bring really unique perspectives to this conversation. Today, we're going to discuss how organizations can go beyond compliance, mitigate emerging risks, and build lasting trust in the ever-changing digital space. Well, thank you, all of you, for being here with me today on my first session. I'm really excited to have you. Let's start by having each of you introduce yourself. Karen, I'll have you go first, ladies first. Please tell us a little bit about your background and your experience related to data governance, privacy, and ethical data practices.
Thank you, Cher. Thank you for having me. And thank you to Insight Jam for producing this event. As you said, I'm Karen Pfeifer, and I'm excited to share that I have a new role as Field Chief AI Officer with an amazing global data and AI solutions company, but that will be announced next week. So I'm keeping that on the DL for now. However, I did most recently serve as Senior Vice President, Enterprise Data and AI at Odyssey with a CDAO scope. And so in that role, I owned data engineering, product, architecture, governance, analytics, data science, all that through this vision, strategy, and operations for them, which basically just means that I spent a lot of time directing the organization and implementing model and insight-driven data and AI strategies. So parts of my role are directly relevant to the panel discussion today, where I led critical aspects of data governance and worked with our CISO to comply with privacy and ethics needs for our data. So my background also includes other companies such as Disney Streaming, Hulu, Comcast MCU, and DirecTV AT&T. So my experience underscores what I would say is sort of the fundamental truth that AI's success is inextricably linked to the quality and governance of the data it relies on.
Awesome. Kamal, take a stab at your opening intro.
All right. Well, so excited to be here on your first podcast with the jam session, Cher. I'm Kamal Maheshwari. So I'm a data practitioner for about 25 plus years. So I've been in this data space for many, many years. And now I'm also a starter co-founder of a company called Decode. And the reason we created Decode is exactly the problems we kept running into, which is ultimately people who are using and consuming data were not really trusting it. They didn't have high confidence in it. So Decode is the first data trust platform, and we realized what it takes to build that. And we can talk about this a little more, but it's a kind of culmination of all of our learnings, talking to the data leaders, community, and others to have a platform that now gives the easy way to start building that trusted data.
Awesome. Scott from Canada.
Yeah, so I'm Scott Ambler. I'm from Toronto, Canada. I've been in the data world, I guess, since the early 90s. In and out, I've done object stuff and process stuff and UML stuff and all that good sort of Agile stuff over the years. And what I've done is I focused a fair bit on data quality, and I recently went back to school and earned another master's degree, and this time in AI. Did a bunch of AI stuff in the early 90s. The expert systems totally failed, but it was fun. What can you do? But lately, I've been helping organizations to understand the relationships between data quality and AI, as well as data-driven decision making, all that good sort of stuff. And so it's been an exciting time. I'm very eager to sort of get through the current hype cycle of LLMs and all that sort of stuff and get back to reality. But just as everybody else said, the data quality and your trust in the data and the availability of the data, all that good sort of stuff, is absolutely critical in all modern organizations. And frankly, most organizations really struggle with this. And I think will continue to do so until they choose to, start upping their game.
That's a great way to put it. So to kick things off, let's set the stage by defining what we all mean by data trust. Many people use terms like data privacy, security, compliance interchangeably, but data trust does go deeper than that. So I'd like to hear from each of you about a minute or so. How do you define data trust, and how does it differ from these other concepts? Scott, I'll shoot this back to you.
Yeah, so trust is in the eye of the beholder. I think first of all, data quality is absolutely critical. If you don't have the quality, you're not gonna trust the data, nor should you. I was actually just a few minutes ago talking to some people about that very issue, and how you really do need to understand what your data is and how you want to use it, and what you're trying to achieve with it. And part of that is building trust in that data. And trust is easily broken. You need to have a continual stream of high quality data in order to do pretty much anything in modern organizations these days. And frankly, the trust isn't there in most companies, and nor should it be.
Awesome. Kamal, I know you have very strong and passionate thoughts about defining data trust and how it differs from privacy, security, and compliance.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole reason that we started down this journey is that we want to really do something about this problem head on. So I may respectfully differ from you, Scott, that it's in the eye of the beholder. We want to change that, really. We should make it more measurable, more referenceable. It shouldn't be, I trust this data, but somebody else doesn't. Because if we can make it a sort of a way to say this data is trusted at certain certain way, and as you said, absolutely 100% continuous way to do that. That's what I think we need to build. Now, in terms of the trust, yeah, of course, it's a process. It takes time, and it's not an abstract concept, really. I mean, just like we do trust with people, the data needs to go through some similar steps. So I completely agree there.
Awesome. Karen, what has data trust meant at, some large organizations that you've worked at, like Disney? I mean, that's massive. And how does it differ, in their leadership's thought process from privacy, security, and compliance?
That's a really great question, Cher. Off the top of my head, those larger companies, data trust is, I would say it's the confident belief by stakeholders that the organization manages data with transparency, accountability, and integrity. A lot of the focus was on integrity, particularly with the media entertainment companies, because there's such a strong responsibility to the consumer, right, that we're serving the data to and for, and personalization and all those effects. So it was really important to lean in on that. We want to ultimately ensure that data and AI's reliability has responsible use behind it. And I feel still today, it's more than meeting minimum requirements, as you're sort of pointing out. It's more about fostering a deep sense of assurance, particularly with stakeholders and customers.
Completely. So, and I mean, you're especially those media companies, they're so customer facing. That's hugely important. So thank you for bringing up transparency and accountability, because that's going to be our next topic. Those are often cited as the foundations of data trust. But as Scott mentioned, organizations struggle with moving beyond those surface level efforts, just publishing privacy policies to demonstrate that genuine transparency. So, Kamal, how can organizations demonstrate meaningful transparency to their customers and partners?
Yeah, so uh, through all the experience and discussions with the leaders, what we learn is there are certain factors that cause distrust in data. One of which actually is lack of transparency. So when somebody is using the data in a dashboard report, maybe even now AI models, and the model is not telling you the right outcome as you think it should, right? I mean, you have an idea, the users have an idea. Or on a dashboard, it's simple enough, a bunch of zeros or nulls or whatever, and they're like, nah, this doesn't look right. What they don't understand or know is, why is this happening? Where did this data come from? What journey did it go through? Nobody's telling them that. If they knew, for example, the process that this data comes through or takes the journey, various hops and steps along the way, they would at least be more understanding, if nothing else, right? They know that, okay, this is going through a lot of complex journey and transformation. They also know who should be the owner, or person or team involved, responsible for it. So rather than yelling at them, they could be asking, hey, I noticed something's wrong. When could this be done or fixed, or what are you doing about it? Very much more cooperative environment if everybody's on the same page. But we kind of kept it. I mean, I'm not blaming anybody. It's just the way we landed here. Early on, we landed with silo approach, and we continue to adopt that, unfortunately. And now we are, at least technically, we are at a point where we should be looking at simplifying, unifying some of these silos that have caused distrust, the lack of transparency. And I think, again, I come back to, I feel the data trust should not be an abstract concept. It should be and can be a very measurable metric, right? So bring things that you feel add to the trust in data, the source, the journey, the transformation, the pipes, whatever. But let's bring it and call it, hey, if all of this is at this high level, then I say my data is at X95 trust. That's, I think, will change the game a little, right? Because then people are talking about, hey, today's data is less trusted than yesterday. What happened? Or, hey, today's data is really good. Well, great, but that also should be investigated. Why is it going up, right? I mean, of course, the goal is to take it up, but I really feel strongly that we should simplify, unify, and then start adopting. I'm certainly here to learn other people's perspective as well, but I'm very passionate about it.
I know you are. And it sounds like, in a bit of summary, data trust is something that we achieve maybe faster with increased data literacy and fluency. So understanding the journey, having compassion for the journey and the transformations. So,
Yep.
and we no one understands that unless there's some level of literacy and fluency around data. So Karen, I can only imagine the journey and transformations data goes through with some of the organizations that you work for. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I really like what Kamal had to say, and you too, Cher. The way I see it too is if we're talking about transparency along those same lines, if I may, we're also talking about accountability, right? And it's really important for organizations to sort of follow what I'll call mechanisms to ensure ownership and sort of proactive issue resolution. I really feel that that's part of driving that trust, like Kamal was saying. And so a lot of that is, some of the basics, right? Establishing clear roles and responsibilities, implementing data quality monitoring tools, incorporating human oversight, especially, well, I'll say it for critical AI insights. Um, Other great ones are establishing feedback loops with customers and partners. I mentioned earlier uh, the part of making sure that stakeholders felt comfortable and supported and felt heard and trusted the data because there's that two-way conversation. So I really feel that's very strongly about that. And then, of course, defining and enforcing ethical guidelines and compliance frameworks.
Definitely. And as you did mention, accountability is just as critical as transparency. So, Scott, what additional mechanisms can organizations put in place to ensure that they take ownership of those data practices and address issues proactively?
Yeah, so a few things. I really like what Kamal was saying earlier about measurement. So hopefully we'll remember to sort of circle around back to it. And as well, he was getting at data lineage and making sure you're tracking where exactly the data is coming from, what transformations it went through to get from point A to point B. And that takes work. And most organizations are not doing that. It's actually one of the features that I like about the Data Vault 2 methodology. If just give them a shout out because they deserve it. But they've got data lineage built right in, and it just gets you out of so much trouble. Sometimes years later. And this, I think, is one of the problems with some of these practices is you need to make an investment today in transparency and in accountability and in setting up structures for responsibility that it could be years later where you finally go back and look at the lineage and say, where the heck, how the heck did this happen? Or it could be minutes later sometimes, right? Like, where did that null came from? Why is this null? This can't possibly be right. This isn't my data. And so you track it back, and sure enough, yeah, that's your data, and you're responsible for it. And you need to fix it in the source, and maybe it'll appear what you want it to be, on the report or on your screen or whatever. So I think that's absolutely critical. But other practices are, remote access or not remote access, the proper level of access, like security access. Am I allowed to? I should be able to see the data. I should be able to see no more, no less. And this makes it hard for transparency as well, right? I might not have the ability to actually to have access to that, to the full lineage of what happened here. Investing in data literacy that we were talking about earlier, as a critical, and AI literacy as well. I'm seeing a lot of organizations playing with AI, playing with LLMs and doing some chat GPT thing, and things aren't going as well as they would like in many cases, because they don't understand the fundamentals of what's going on in the background, and they might not even understand that the problem they're trying to solve is not an LLM type of a problem, right? You got a good problem. The solution's got to match the problem that you're facing. And ethical literacy, I would, as well. We were talking about earlier, absolutely critical. So there's a lot of challenges here, and the problem is it's really easy to talk about data literacy and AI literacy and ethical literacy, but at the end of the day, that requires education. Ongoing education. It's not a one-shot deal, right? It requires support. It requires people to care, and I hate to say it, but it does require people to care. And the people we're asking to become literate at all these things, they have other things to do, and we're not the only people asking to become literate at X. You have to be literate at marketing. You got to be literate at this and at that and that and that and that. And these people are already overwhelmed in their day-to-day jobs. And here we are coming along and say, oh, by the way, I need you to understand all this stuff now. and I'm not the only person that's doing that to them. So it's really hard, and it's just hard, and we got to do the work. At the same time, we can't back away from it either, right? Like, I would expect my executives to be and lower to be data literate. I don't think that's unreasonable to ask these days, and yet that's brutal to actually implement in most organizations, and to continue to support and continue to have multi-year support that survives, next year's reorg. Because that's the problem with these programs, right? We'll set a program up, get it going, declare success, which is absolutely foolish to do. But then it doesn't survive the reorg because it's no longer, the fun, sexy new thing. And because there's some other, thing we got to focus on. So this is all problematic. But we got.
This is an opportunity I want to take since Karen and Scott both come from enterprise culture, right? Do you feel that the hierarchy or whatever the structure from top down, bottom up is important to put in place, or in your workplaces, do you feel you are equipped in that way?
Absolutely, Kamal. I think you're, if I may take this one, Scott, first, just because I feel strongly about it. I feel like you're pitching me a softball here. So yes, right. I think we all know that if the data governance and that drive for data literacy, and I might even differentiate data fluency here, again, leaning towards stakeholder and commitment there. If there's not that commitment from the top level, it just doesn't work well. And Scott said that, right? It just doesn't work. It has, if I may, we were talking a little bit about data literacy and fluency. So like data literacy is reading data, right? And data fluency is speaking it, right? So an example would be data literacy would be understanding a bar chart showing website visits over months, indicating a sort of increased traffic trend, right? And you can read what's on the bar chart, right? But the fluency is recognizing, for example, that increasing website traffic correlates with a recent marketing campaign, right? And so if the leadership isn't bought into the governance and they're not driving that, then we're not driving them sharing about connecting what's happening in the business to what's happening in the data, and then ensuring that that's being communicated across all levels. And then that allows the need for governance to be preeminent, right? All of a sudden people go, wow, I can't trust the data. I not only can't trust what's on the chart here, but then I don't even really understand what the correlating activities are that are driving that data. So I think it's very holistic, and it does come from top down.
Want more Insight Jam? Subscribe to our YouTube channel for shorts, panels, podcasts, and more. In your Shorts feed, enjoy a daily dose of best practices from tech experts and leading solution providers, while long-form panel discussions and keynotes, recorded live every quarter, go deep on important industry topics. And don't miss our collection of regular podcasts, keeping you informed on the latest trends. We're hard at work collecting the best enterprise technology information from around the globe, so subscribe to be notified of our next upload. Now, let's get back to the show.
So, Scott, you started to expand upon ethical data practices, and we're really seeing that these are becoming increasingly important. As you mentioned, organizations are playing around with or leveraging our next generation technologies, AI, advanced analytics. But ethics goes beyond just protecting the data, touches on fairness, bias mitigation, and societal impact of data-driven decisions. So, Scott, how can organizations ensure fairness and mitigate bias and promote responsible AI practices, all while they're trying to maintain trust?
Yeah, so I think once again, this is hard. Some of the challenges with ethics are that people's ethics vary. So a set of ethics that are appropriate for America is very different than a set of ethics that's appropriate for China, which is different yet again than, say, a set of ethics for the European Union, and let alone like getting deeper into different organizations and different people. So right away, and if you're an international facing organization, that's even more challenging because you're going to have different sets of ethics for different types of markets that you're in. But when the data, on the data side of things, for example, bias is a big issue in the AI space. Well, there's exactly a 100% chance of your data being biased. The issue becomes, how much bias is there? Are you aware of it? And what can you do to reduce it? You'll never get it down to zero, but you can certainly get it down. Hopefully you can get it down to a point where you can live with whatever biases are there if you understand them. I always like to promote a book by Kathy O'Neill called Weapons of Math Destruction. It's about 10 years old now, and she's written a bunch of good books. So any book by Kathy O'Neill, I would suggest, but certainly the Weapons of Math Destruction. And it's basically a collection of horror stories. And when you get like data and AI horror stories, and the stories are follow the same basic pattern. It's like these well-intentioned people trying to do some good thing for their organization or for for the public, in the case of government agencies. And then there's always some horrendous side effect of their really good intentions. Like, people are going to jail, people are not getting mortgages, people are getting hunted down by bigots. There was I can't remember if it was that book or another book where people were the Gay Pride Parade in New York published their data and published where people were coming from. And what happened was, well, yeah, that's great. You can see really cool maps of where people are coming from to go to the parade, but then it also shows where they live, which is valuable intel if you're a Nazi. So there's these horrible side effects that people don't appreciate until the bad things happen. So this is the challenge, I think, for organizations. Are you even aware that you might be doing something bad? Like, people are well intentioned. Like, they're not, for the most part, they're not evil. They're not trying to do bad things, but bad things can still happen regardless of what you set out to do. Are you monitoring what's going on? Are you even able to detect that bad things are happening? And particularly the challenge with AI is it can happen at scale at internet speed. So you really got to be on the ball sometimes to figure out what's going on. And it gets back to data literacy and data fluency and AI literacy and all that good sort of stuff. Do you appreciate the potential challenges, and can you react? Can you detect the challenges and react appropriately, and then hopefully put things in place where so it doesn't happen again, and that way you can just go on to making new and bigger and better mistakes. But which is better than making the same old mistake over and over and over again.
Which, I mean, that's Agile 101, fail fast, learn from it, move forward. So, Karen, are there any industries or organizations that stand out to you as leaders in ethical data practices? And maybe what lessons our listeners can learn from their approaches?
That's another great question.
And you can promote companies you've worked for if you think you're doing,
Yeah.
guys are doing it right. I can't believe that a company like Disney's not doing it right.
Yes. I mean, obviously, yes. Disney, Hulu, Comcast, I think, honestly, like, all of them are doing that. I mean, everyone's coming out with best intentions. Everyone is, making sure that they're compliant in the ways that they need to be compliant with. Of course, all these companies are doing that. But your question was really about, I think, was there a question about the things that are like, I would say that companies more even in highly regulated sectors like government, healthcare, financial services, those companies even have to show a stronger force, right? Because they have more government regulated restrictions that they have to comply with. I mean, obviously the big companies like Disney and Comcast too as well, but I would say, at Disney, we didn't have to worry about HIPAA compliance with healthcare, at least that I'm aware of. Maybe there is, but these opinions are my own. All right. But I think it's important for them to show a strong focus on the data governance, and that supports the ethical practices. Lessons around all of that included things like incorporating ethics from the start. right? And making sure that when we were creating products, particularly data products, which has been my sweet spot for a very long time, right? Was about making sure that, from the very baseline, how were we incorporating the data in ensuring that the data that we did pull in were ethically treated well and balancing the business goals with strong governance. Of course, fostering, I think Scott said this well too earlier, fostering this sort of, not in these words, but responsible data culture, and sort of recognizing the ongoing need for human oversight, I'd like to say, to ensure even ethical AI use and maintain that trust is really important.
I completely agree, and it's so great that we're all on the same page. Although, a good panel discussion usually deserves a contrarian. Kamal, how is DCube working to ensure fairness, mitigate bias, and just promote responsible data practices while maintaining trust?
Yeah, when all of you were talking about ethical issues and practices, I was thinking back, all these years I've been in data, this has never come up until recently. In fact, I'm very logically minded, so I can't think of anything more black and white than data, right? I mean, zeros and ones, and there's number is number and whatever. But it's a very important topic that has now come up through the different usage of data. Certainly, the AI has brought this sense that there could be bias, there could be bad outcome, this and that. And of course, I think even before AI, that BI and visualization has also brought up some aspects of, hey, yeah, data is good, but just the way you present it can have slightly different meaning or impact. I get it completely. With what we believe still is, if you take care of the basics of data, treat it the way it should be treated, with the care, respect, confidence, transparency, and all of that, and do it continuously, as I think Scott also said, everybody understands that this isn't a one-time thing. It is an ongoing thing. Literacy, fluency, all of these should be combined, which I think at least gives you a better chance of starting from a foundation where then you can look at things like, is the usage of data, which I know is highly confident and trusted, is being done in an ethical, non-biased way. Before we get to that, you can't be thinking of ethical if you don't even know if your data is actually good and trustworthy. I'm kind of there. I feel, and we created DCube for that purpose. We want it to be a foundation. We want to give you a strong foundation where you will not be questioning the data. You will now then focus on how do you use it.
Awesome. It sounds like it's something we've all needed in the world. So as we've been talking, I think an underlying theme is that building trust, it's just not a one-time effort. Scott mentioned ongoing education. We've talked about journeys that span entire data life cycles. And organizations that embed trust into their culture are obviously better equipped to navigate the challenges and adapt to evolving next generation technologies. So, Karen, what strategies can organizations use to embed trust into their entire data lifecycle?
Earlier, I mentioned that data trust could be defined as, I believe I said, the confident belief by stakeholders that an organization manages data with transparency, accountability, and integrity. And to embed trust into the entire data lifecycle, organizations should adopt a holistic approach that integrates that trust building measure at every stage. That could be from data collection all the way through to AI deployment and beyond. And this begins with establishing a strong foundation of data governance, like we said, clearly defining roles, responsibilities, policies, ethical guidelines for all of the data related activities within the company, not even within the enterprise data organization itself, but beyond, which is where, when you're thinking about sort of a broader CDAO, CAIO role, you're really thinking beyond your enterprise key and core data sets, right? You're thinking about how the data are ingested all across the company and used in back end and front end systems as well. I think I should touch upon a point about data collection practices. I think if I'm going holistically from bottom up, there's data collection practices. We need to prioritize transparency and consent. Organizations need to be upfront with individuals about what the data are that are being collected, how it's going to be used, and have, I think, clear mechanisms for obtaining informed consent. I think that's not talked about enough. And then maintaining, obviously, high data quality throughout the life cycle. I won't go too deep into that other than to say that if you're going through proper observation, validation, monitoring, cleansing processes, then you're able to ensure that the data that's used for analysis and AI model training is accurate, consistent, and reliable. So that's very important. I also wanted to touch upon transparency and explainability. We already mentioned that before, but I think it's even more crucial where AI is involved. So if organizations are striving to make AI systems as understandable as possible, then they need to be utilizing explainable AI techniques to provide insights on how the models arrive at their outputs. So that's really important as well. We already talked about accountability mechanisms, but things like having regular audits of the data in AI systems and having well-defined processes for remediation, continuous improvement. And again, I'll say it again, incorporating human oversight for more critical decisions there. And then finally, I think the last thing to touch upon is data security, right? It's sort of a non-negotiable element of building trust. And oftentimes that data security sits outside of a chief data AI officer purview. It sort of sits with the CIO office. So you are working very closely. I had some really amazing partners at Odyssey and Disney on the CISO side, the platform side, even software engineering side, in making sure that we were building sort of the elements of trust and strong security measures into everything we were doing from the bottom up, top down.
Scott, I know you wanted to revisit measurements. So as AI and data ecosystems evolve, how can organizations measure and maintain that trust effectively over time?
Well, I think it's, there's a lot of things that you can measure. So, so first, what are you trying to achieve, right? Do we want to, support trust? Do we support transparency? Then we've got to ask is how we're going to measure that. Do we want better data quality? Well, how are we going to measure data quality? Like, what is data quality for you in your organization, in your context? And then let's put some measures in place to keep an eye on things. The other challenge with measures is they only last for so long, right? So once you start to achieve whatever improvement that you want to achieve, then you might want to measure just to monitor for a while, but you've achieved your goal. So those measures, the bang for your buck is no longer there on those measures, other than from a monitoring point of view to avoid slipping, back into whatever bad habits you had before. So it depends is the answer. But I think it's if you're already struggling with data, whatever data issues you are, and then we come along and say, oh, by the way, we need to get our act together on metrics. Well, that's just more data. So we're probably still going to struggle a bit with the measurement program. But And then, and then gets back to metrics literacy, I guess you could say. Do we understand what we're measuring and how to use it and what it means and what it doesn't mean? I've been involved in studies years ago where we're giving dashboards to executives, or here's what's going on in your teams, and then we measured, do you actually understand what these dashboards are saying? And invariably they didn't. And it was all over the board, all over the board, and you could actually make the argument the dashboards were doing more damage than good, due to and it was in a way it was data literacy, but it was also they just didn't understand what they were responsible for. Like, they had teams under them doing things and they just didn't understand. And then, so they were getting numbers from these teams that hopefully the teams understood, but certainly the executives really didn't have a clue what those dashboards were telling them, and had no idea how to leverage the information they were being provided. Now, hopefully it's gotten better, but I suspect not.
Mhm.
That's a proper suspicion.
Mhm.
It's surely suspicious. Kamal, how do you help clients figure out what they should be measuring and, to help them maintain that trust over time?
Yeah, no, I think we're really big on building and bringing some level of measurability to this quote unquote abstract term trust. There is nothing more important for data than trust. I mean, what else can it be, right? If you give somebody some data and they don't think this is reliable or they can trust it, but then it's no use. I often call it is the holy grail for data. Trusting and building that trust in data is the holy grail. So what we do is we believe now, certainly different organizations will have slightly different measures and a way to incorporate, but let's collect a lot of the measurements and monitoring observations and then assign some weights and biases to that. So what I mean is, certain data source, for example, you may know it's really highly trusted based on your experience, based on where it comes from, how it generated, whatever. So give it a little more weight. Some other journey or transformation may have been a problematic thing in the past. Just again, you're going by some anecdotal or experience driven, right? So give it a little low weightage, but bring it all together and make it a sort of a composite score of reflecting different weights and biases of all of your measurements or observations. And that's when I mentioned a composite score for data trust, a 85 or a 93 or whatever it is. Every organization may have it different, and it should be, but at least you have a reference point. Today it's this, yesterday it was that. Our goal is to kind of keep inching it up a little. And it's not just a number, it's really reflecting your process, your people, the quality measures, lineage, who has access, is there enough security built in, masking, tagging, all of this stuff. I'm not saying that we are quite there yet, but that's the journey we're on. We are building that level of simplicity, and I very strongly believe that we as in the data leaders and community have done more harm than good by adopting these silo structures. It's got to be simplified and hopefully unified to get the value and the greater adoption that we all hope for.
No, and I think you hit the nail on the head. We can't know where we want to go if we don't know where we actually are.
Yeah.
So setting these measures up as reference points is just truly the right start to maintain that trust on our journey.
Unlock better leads through Solutions Review events.
Welcome to Data Demo Day. Expert Roundtable, Solution Spotlight featuring Monte Carlo, Cohesity, Denodo, Cloudflare, High Gear, Broadcom, Next Thing.
Boost your brand with a webinar that shares comprehensive use cases, real-time product demos, and an interactive Q&A. All broadcast live to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Zoom from our Boston studio, or even on location. Fill your sales funnel with high-quality targeted leads. And contact us today by visiting solutionsreview.com/virtual events.
So we're going to have a couple rapid fire rounds here. And the first one is, even with best practices in place, trust gets broken. It happens, whether it's due to data breaches, ethical lapses, or unintended consequences. But trust isn't irreparable. And I think we've talked a little bit about that through some of our discussions. So, Scott, I'm going to start with you. When trust is broken, what is a critical step or two that organizations should take to rebuild that trust?
Well, I think that, how you act is absolutely critical to rebuilding trust, and appreciating why you broke the trust, what actually happened, and then doing what you can to make it right. An example of not making it right a few years ago was Air Canada. They had a chatbot that made some promises about refunds, and then Air Canada didn't fulfill them, because they said, well, that's an AI, it's not our fault, we're not responsible for our AI. And that didn't go well for them in the court of public opinion. It did not go well for them in the actual court of legal opinion. And yet the fundamental mistake they made was they didn't make it right. They didn't even understand that they needed to make it right. And I think this is where the problem becomes in a lot of organizations, is that something happens and they're thinking about it from their point of view as opposed to the customer's point of view. Missing, for example, we hear it all the time, people miss flights. A flight, people get abandoned, in certain countries because the airplane isn't available. And they get stuck there for days. Happened to a friend of mine just a while ago. Well, to make it right, you pay for everybody's hotels, and you make sure they can get home, and you communicate. You get people on the ground helping people, because there could be some serious implications of all this. And like this absolutely, and you won't fully regain people's trust, but you can certainly do everything you can to mitigate the damage that you've caused by breaking their trust in the first place. And it will go a long way won't go all the way, but it'll go a long way to rebuilding that trust, some of that trust again.
Completely agree. We've all heard the airplane and travel horror stories. So, Karen, what is a critical step or two that you see organizations should take to rebuild trust?
Well, I really liked what Scott said, and I'll build on that. I mean, I think he said that's what we acknowledge the failure, right, and clearly communicate what happened and the scope of the impact, and the steps that we're doing to not contain the damage, but sort of make sure that we're making sure it's not getting worse, right? And so it is really crucial to take full responsibility and conduct investigations, focus on immediate remediation, as Scott suggested, right? Sort of fixing the vulnerabilities that led to the breach is really important. And then to rebuild the long-term trust, organizations need to implement significant preventative measures, right? I think so much of it is focused on fix, but then you also need to have an eye on the future and make sure that you're including strengthening security protocols, enhancing the governance frameworks, figuring out with the teams and even your governance board, whatever, or AI board, whatever that may be, what you need to do to patch up the holes that happen. And of course, then reinforcing the training across the organization, technical and non-technical alike.
Awesome. Kamal, any recommendations that you have for clients if they've broken trust and need to repair it?
No, I think we definitely agreed that acknowledging, accepting is definitely the first step. But then also beyond repair, the only way you can do that to sort of long-term or in a continuous manner is if you have process in place to be transparent. I mean, adopt some of these transparent practices as appropriate, right? You can't share everything with the general public, but maybe more within the organization or however it is done. But accepting and then adopting, I think, is probably the two main thing that I would recommend people.
So let's take our second lightning round here and talk about the future outlook. I'm going to start with you, Karen. How do you see the concept of data trust evolving in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well,
It's a loaded
know.
question.
it is a little bit, but I'm kind of smiling because it's like I'm going to be saying AI a lot in this part, right? It's looking ahead 5 to 10 years. Data trust is even more critical as AI permeates all aspects of business, right? At some point, it's going to touch practically everybody, if not in the first degree, at least in a secondary degree. And so we'll see significant evolution driven by several key factors, right? Firstly, robust data governance and security will move from being a priority to a fundamental requirement. If organizations end up failing in these areas, there's, as we mentioned earlier on the session, there's severe reputational and regulatory consequences. And then secondly, we expect a greater emphasis on responsible AI practices, right? So built-in mechanisms for fairness, bias detection, ethical considerations, and then lastly, evolving regulatory landscape. I don't think we brought that up yet, right? But particularly around AI and data privacy, that's going to shape how organizations build and maintain data trust. And compliance, I said this before, will be intrinsically linked to trustworthiness.
Scott, what's an emerging trend or technology that organizations should be paying attention to, in terms of looking at their future?
Well, certainly everything revolves around AI, but it once again, it gets back to data quality. If you don't have your act together on data, you're never going to get your act together on AI. And so I think the fundamental data infrastructure technologies, we've got to up our game in most organizations. We've got to start paying down data debt. We've got to get frankly, the project management community, we need to get them under control. Like they do cause just so much damage in their screwy values around on time and on budget. And, to be fair to them, they get pressured by the business to, there's some mythical date we need to hit or some, fanciful budget that we need to hit. And then the project management community are good little soldiers and they march to that tune, not pushing back against like these goofball ideas coming from the business. So what happens? The teams cut quality and they cut data quality. And we see this over and over and over and over again. Kamal was talking about the problem with data silos. Why do we have data silos? Because we have projects. End of story. End of story on them. It's projects. We've got to purge organizations of the idea of running IT projects. And until we do that, we're going to be in serious trouble. And this is not something that, certainly the project management office in your organization wants to hear. And the finance people are, partly to blame for this too. Why do we have projects? Well, it's because the finance people want to finance projects. So there's a lot of very interesting implications of some subtle things that we take for granted to be best practices in many cases. So we, you want to look at why we have a lot of data debt. Look at your project managers, and deal with that. Deal with that problem.
This is true. Projects tend to generate more debt than they solve problems. I agree with you there. Kamal, what's one actionable step that organizations can take today to start building data trust within their data culture?
Well, I mean, I would say start adopting some of the solutions tooling that are now available, right? Start building a strong foundation. And all the things we talked about, top down, the support from executives, and so on and so forth, collaboration amongst teams, they're all important. Because I've been in data for so long, data has always been important, but I'm so glad that with the AI coming on the scene in the last 4 or 5 years, data is getting even more uh, um, recognition, if you will. And we all understand this garbage in, garbage out paradigm. In AI world, it has become garbage in, disaster out, because AI algorithms will amplify any little thing that you feed in the data. Even the most sophisticated AI will not get you the outcome you want or want to achieve without giving it good, confident, trusted data. So I still really do believe a strong foundation is needed, and this is a good time. Tooling is available. I mean, we're doing something about it. Some others as well, and just evaluate your options and go for it.
Go for it. That's a great way to put it, because I think with so many options and all of the things that we talked about, data governance, and there's so much, it's paralysis by analysis. So picking a path, picking the best path that fits your data culture, and being able to move forward is definitely a great way to start. So we're going to begin to wrap up, and I'm going to ask each of you to take a moment and let viewers know how they can best get in touch with you virtually. And if you have any upcoming conferences or speaking engagements that people can see you in person. So Karen, ladies first.
Thank you, Sharon. Thanks again for hosting this. Great job. Everyone, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn for probably the most responsive answers, or even I believe here on the Insight Jam platform, that's possible. And then I do have, as I mentioned before, some exciting developments coming up, and you can connect with me in person at the Google Cloud Next conference in Vegas. I will be there Wednesday the 9th and Thursday the 10th, a little bit, maybe Friday morning before I catch my flight out. So I look forward to seeing anybody there.
Awesome. Scott, best way to get in touch with you? And what's upcoming for you? I can't believe you don't have something upcoming.
Yeah, well, I've been trying to minimize or reduce at least my conference appearances, but not working out well for me. But anyways, yes, the best way to get a hold of me is probably on LinkedIn or at my main site, scottambler.com. My next conference, if memory serves, is actually in September. I'll be speaking about AI and data quality, as the case may be here, in September in Brussels. I just got back from Agile India, where I was speaking about AI and data quality as well. So that was all pretty good. And I do regular podcasts like this and other good things. And I co-teach a Data Vault 2 workshop about once a month through Data Rebels. So that's a really great organization. And if you're serious about data quality and you're serious about data-informed decision-making and AI, DV2 is probably something you want to look at.
Awesome. You are an international man of leisure.
I am.
Kamal, best ways to get in touch with you. And by chance, where might we find you in person next?
Cher, thank you for having me here. Really, always a pleasure. Cher and I know each other for many years now, being in the local area and having done some events together. Best way, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So please do find me there. Our website, decube.io, decube.io, should give you a lot of what I talked about, building the foundation with the data trust, measurable, strong governance practices, and so on. Next, I believe Cher and I will be at EDW plus DGIQ conference in May, early May in LA. So that's where we will be. I think there's another event, perhaps a little more local, that we're doing, right? So yeah, I think I'm very much a fan of over communicating than not. So if you reach out to me, you will hear something.
Indeed. Yeah, that second, which is local to Colorado, is the Rocky Mountain Information Security Conference. Yeah, at the end of May. Karen, are we going to see you at DGIQ EDW? We're going to be in your neighborhood.
That would be fantastic. Let's make that happen.
We should make that happen for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, even if it's just after hours fun. So, well, thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you to all of you for sharing your expertise and perspectives and joining me on my first podcast hosting. As we've learned, trust really isn't just about meeting regulations. It's about creating a culture of transparency, accountability, and ethical responsibility. To our listeners, thank you so much for joining us this Friday morning. Be sure to subscribe to InsideGM.com for more discussions on enterprise technology across various tech domains. And catch Robert Eves' next The Jam session on connections, fun in the New York Times, essential for evolving analytics and AI apps, Friday, April 18th. So until next time, stay curious and always be evolving. Thank you so much, everybody.